We met in college. I was a senior, and she was a sophomore. She was a good-looking woman, and I was a bit of a nerd. It took me a few beers at one of the parties, but I was able to approach her. When I asked her to dance, she said yes. We started talking. I used one of the old phrases, "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" I told her I'm a geek and don't go on dates. She laughed and said I was inept, but agreed to dance with me anyway. We both had too much to drink, and she told me that she had broken up with her ex-boyfriend 2 days before and decided to just go out and have fun. Her friend told her about this party, and she came to it. We both ended up getting drunk and having sex in my dorm room. I left my cork on the doorknob so my roommate wouldn't disturb us. It was the first time I had ever used a cork. The girl always got my roommate. I don't remember much about the sex that night, but from the way the bed looked in the morning, we must have had a good time. I got up and took a quick shower and then woke Susan up. When she woke up, she didn't look too pleased with herself. I directed her to the bathroom and she went into the shower. After the shower, she behaved a little better. She really was a nice-looking woman. Looking at the two of us, hardly anyone would have thought we were a couple. I made her breakfast, after which I took her to the hostel. I asked her if I could date her again, and she said that she wasn't ready to date yet, but if she saw me at parties, she wouldn't leave. In hindsight, I think that in that way she meant to say that she didn't think I was good enough for her. I saw her at other parties from time to time, but she was spending time with her girlfriends and dancing with other guys. And why wouldn't she? She was beautiful and available. She danced with me when I asked her out. I didn't know if I cared about her or if I was just being nice. I come from a good family and was raised with good family values. The problem is that I didn't stick to them in college. I went to parties and got drunk a few times. Besides Susan, I slept with several other girls during my college years. Unfortunately, they were party thugs. The girls were willing to have sex with anyone for the price of admission. I guess that was one way to get laid without turning to prostitutes. I wanted to get a girlfriend, but geek girls didn't like to party. I put sex before commitment. I was miserable, and my roommate noticed it. Tony DeMarco was a good-looking Italian from New York who wanted to come to our college because of the excellent computer science program he offered. We became very good friends. He wasn't as shy as I was, but we helped each other with our studies. I can say that we became as close as brothers, and no, neither of us knew what gay meant. Tony was the one who made sure I was invited to parties where I actually got sex. He had connections. That's what I call a friend. I think the bond between us was finally cemented the day we were leaving class and he slipped on the steps. He fell backwards and hit his head on the concrete. He was motionless, slumped over, blue in the face and not breathing. From somewhere in the back of my mind, a story about someone swallowing their tongue came to mind. This interested me greatly, and I remembered what I had to do. I stood behind him, tilted his head back, reached into his open mouth and wrapped my fingers around his twisted tongue to bring it back into place. As his airway opened, his lungs sucked in a huge amount of air, and his skin color began to return to normal. I realized I was close to tears at the thought of my best friend in pain. He opened his eyes and saw me holding his head, and my face contorted with emotion. "Mark," he wheezed. "What happened?" "Don't worry, Tony, I'll be fine. It's just that my tongue fell out of my mouth." "Huh? Well, let me up, okay? I'm fine." After the medics finished examining Tony, they gave him a positive report and we headed back to the dorm. As we approached the building, Tony stopped, noticing a limo parked out front with a driver standing at the back door. Shrugging, Tony headed towards the limo, and as he approached the car, the driver opened the back door and his father stepped out. Angelo DeMarco was of imposing size, 6 feet and 220 pounds, and smiled wordlessly. He hugged Tony and breathed a sigh of relief when he realized his son was okay. "Dad, it's Mark." "He's," Tony muttered. "I know who he is." Angelo smiled. "Mark, I owe you for saving my son. I'm indebted to you. If you need any help, you come to me, okay? Don't forget, I mean it, anytime." He shook my hand. 5 minutes later, Tony left, back to New York, and I was left wondering if I'd ever had a real friend. Then I met Susan my senior year of high school. After our one and only meeting, I saw her on campus from time to time, and she was always nice to me. I guess I thought she might have feelings for me. I decided to ask her out again, and she said yes. She seemed a little different than the last times I talked to her, not as carefree as she was at parties. We went out to dinner and a movie. She actually held my hand and smiled at me. We had sex in the car. We did it 3 times, and the last time I didn't use a condom. I remember asking her if she wanted me to put one on now, and she said no. I figured she must be on the pill. I asked her if she wanted to go out again next week, and she said yes. I guess I got a girlfriend. We saw each other the next few weekends, and she told me we had a problem. Mark, I'm pregnant. You're the only man I've ever been with. What are we going to do? I was shocked. I had been raised to do what I thought was right, even if I had a feeling Susan was using me. I was stupid enough to agree to this just for sex. Apparently, it was time to pay the price. I was graduating from high school in a month, and I had a job ready at my father's insurance office. I was taking business courses that would help me become a licensed insurance agent. Susan was raised by her grandparents. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 12 years old. Her grandparents promised to help her with her education. She wanted to become a lawyer. That's where the backlash came in. I was in favor of a woman's right to choose, but I was still against abortion. It would have been hard for me to kill my child. I guess it's different if it's someone else's choice. Let's get married, I said. There's a good position waiting for me next month, and you can continue your education. You can take 1 semester off when the baby comes. We'll be able to do that. I love you, and I want our baby. I really wasn't sure if I loved her or not, but I wanted to do the right thing. I knew the alternative was a paid abortion, and I really didn't want to do that. I doubted she loved me, but we agreed to get married. I wrote home to my parents and informed them that I would be getting married after graduation. I told them that Susan, whom they never met, was pregnant, but we loved each other and would be married soon. I mentioned before that my father owned an insurance agency. It was actually more than that. He also sold real estate and had an auction business. We weren't rich, but we lived pretty well. Susan and I were married a month after graduation. We invited Susan's grandparents to the wedding. They seemed like very nice people and were happy for Susan and me. They thanked me for doing the right thing by Susan. They talked to me privately for a few minutes. Mark, we know Susan can be a little wild and stubborn, and we did the best we could with her. As you probably know, she loses her temper when she doesn't get her way. The truth was that I didn't know anything about her. We got drunk, had sex, and about 2 months later met up and started dating. The next thing I knew, she was pregnant. I figured she found out she was pregnant and freaked out. So she started dating me. We hit it off, and she decided that I was the solution to her dilemma. The thing is, she's a beautiful woman. She has a nice personality, and as I later found out, she's not a bad actress. My parents liked her and always helped them. We started renting a nice 3-bedroom house with an option to buy within a year. I thought we had a good time together. The sex was good, especially the first couple years. After the baby was born, Susan took a semester leave of absence that lasted only 10 weeks. She transferred to a college that was only a few miles from home. She managed to get to school without any problems. My mom watched our daughter Trina while Susan went to school. I loved my job. I sold insurance and real estate. I helped at auctions, but there was no way I could be an auctioneer. The auctions were handled by my dad and his employee, Bob. I didn't know how most married couples behaved since my parents were the only ones I lived with. But it seemed to me that they were closer than Susan and I were. For the first 2 years, that's how we lived. I worked and Susan went to school. In the evenings, we stayed home with Trina. We would watch TV and Trina would play on the floor. Maybe twice a week we had sex. It was all good. I don't remember her ever complaining. Susan started taking the pill after Trina was born. We didn't want any more children. Everything was going well until Susan graduated from high school. I asked her if she wanted to work in our firm, but she said she wanted to do billing or be a secretary in a law office. Her wish came true. She started working in a large law office. She was hired as a secretary. I thought the extra income would be nice, but Susan was spending it all on herself. Don't get me wrong, I was making good money and providing for all of our needs. But once Susan started getting a paycheck, everything we had wasn't enough. She had to buy a new car. Of course, it had to be a sports car. Then she started buying furniture and appliances. I told her I wouldn't buy everything new. If she wanted everything new, let her pay for it herself. She was stubborn and got her way, just like her grandparents said. She didn't want to have sex with me for over a month. Finally, I gave in like a wuss. I told her I would pay for half of the new furniture and appliances. The rest of her money, I hadn't seen a dime of it. I didn't even know how much she made. When it came time to file her tax return, she told me that her bosses thought we should file separately. Since they were lawyers, I agreed with her. I found out later that they never told her that. She just didn't want me to know how much she made. She bought her own clothes. She had a whole closet. Some things she thought were short or too sexy for the office, but when I brought it up, there was an argument every time. Not 6 months after starting work, she declared that she needed a night out with the girls. She needed what she called personal time. So every Friday night, I knew she was going out with the girls. She was usually home by midnight. I didn't have a problem with that. I played golf twice a week, so I had no right to complain. When the golf season was over, I would join the bowling team with the other agents in our office. Dad's business was our sponsor. That's how we lived until Trina went to school. Susan would lay out her clothes the night before, and I would always get up with Trina. We would eat breakfast together, and I would always drive her to school. I would pick her up unless I had an appointment. Then Mom would take her to her house until either Susan or I picked her up. As time went on, Susan and I began to drift farther and farther apart. It happened gradually, but I could see it happening. She was never interested in my friends, but acted cordial to them when we saw each other. Behind their backs, she called them weirdos, nerds, and other words. She had a different circle of friends. She would invite them to her house to visit, play cards, and so on. I always played the role of a good husband, trying to avoid arguments. I was never interested in her friends. It was like going back to college. Conversations were often reduced to sex, and parties were always drunkenly held at their house. If I didn't want to go, there was bound to be an argument. Sometimes I thought the men were flirting a little with Susan. If I told her about it, she just laughed. In fact, I was often the butt of jokes. Sometimes Susan worked late. During this time, Trina and I became best friends. She confided in me and told me everything that happened at school. I helped her with her homework every night, and there wasn't a lot of it. And she loved it. I attended teacher conferences and supported Trina in everything she did. Susan still treated Trina well when she was home. Susan would always say, "Honey this and honey that," even though all Trina wanted was for Mom to be around more often. If Trina said she wished Mom was in school, Susan always replied that she had to work to keep bread on the table. We had been married for 7 years now, and I often went online after I put Trina to bed. I started reading stories about cheating wives. I read story after story and learned that Susan had been doing the same thing for years. Was I being paranoid, or was Susan cheating on me? I had no doubt that I was living with a cheating wife. However, she was a good actress. I started watching for signs, such as phone conversations. She would often end the conversation or change the subject when I entered the room. She always deleted all messages and regularly cleared the caller ID. I noticed that after outings with friends, she always washed her clothes the next day, especially her underwear. There were many other signs that I read about on the history page. She never wanted sex after coming home from a party. If I left for a meeting, Trina often stayed at my parents' house. I considered hiring a private investigator to follow her, but there was no point. We lived in a state where divorce was split 50-50. I considered buying surveillance equipment like they did in the stories, but I had no doubt she was fooling around, and besides, I couldn't afford it. It was Trina that bothered me the most. She was the reason I stayed with Susan. If the divorce went through, I might not be able to see Trina very often. She was my life. Susan started going to his friends' houses more often. She'd use any excuse. I went with her from time to time, but I didn't like it. She often flaunted herself in front of other men. It was as if she dared to do something. There came a point where everything I was doing wasn't good enough. Nothing we owned was as beautiful as her friends. We still had sex, but I was lucky if it happened once a month. She didn't enjoy it anymore. I felt like she was doing it out of pity for me. I stayed with her for Trina's sake, but now I realize that was the wrong reason. One day everything went to shit. I came back from my trip a day early. This time I did as I had read in the stories and didn't call home. When I arrived, it was already evening. An unfamiliar car was parked in our driveway. I got out of the car, quietly walked over and opened the front door. There was a light on in the living room, but no one was there. I could hear sounds coming from our bedroom. Yeah, I like that. It was Susan having fun on our bed. I was pissed, but not surprised to see Brad having fun with Susan. He ran an exercise center that Susan went to. He flirted with her all the time, but this time he got caught. It is worth mentioning that Brad's wife Jill is a model. She mostly does face and hand modeling, but she has an amazing body. She's not one of those skinny models you see on the runways. Why would a man cheat with a 7 when there's a 10 waiting for him at home? I've known Jill for a long time, and she's one of the few people Susan knows that I like. Brad was just releasing accusations at Susan when I walked in on them. What the hell? I said. What are you doing home? You should have called first. There, now you know. Get out of the room so we can get dressed. Susan exclaimed. Yeah, maybe I'll call Jill and invite her over, I replied. You tell Jill and I'll kick your ass, you wuss, Brad said. I stood in the room. Brad was right, he could kick my ass, but at least I had to fight back. I thought, what's the use? I would just get my ass kicked and Susan would enjoy what she saw. I left the room and heard them muttering, but they had already closed the door. Brad came out first. Listen, you wuss, I meant what I said about Jill. If she finds out, you're going to the hospital. Do you understand, asshole? Just get out of my house, was all I could answer. He walked over to me, pinned me against the wall, clenched his fist and laughed. Then he turned around and walked out. I stood still like a statue. Susan came out and stared at me. Okay, now you know. I tried to keep it from you, but I knew you would find out someday, Susan said. I want to get a divorce. I'm going to start the paperwork tomorrow. I wish you would just go away. She looked at me and laughed. You're not going to divorce me. You don't have the guts. Besides, I'd get half of everything you own. You can't afford that. Besides, you'll miss your precious daughter. What will you tell her? I'll tell her the truth. Her mother is a cheating whore and we're getting a divorce. She's a smart girl and I'm sure she'll get over it. Hell, you're not here half the time anyway. I'm not going anywhere, and you're not man enough to make me. I suggest you move to the guest room if you don't want to be with me, Susan replied. I left the house and picked Trina up. I had to talk to Trina and tell her the truth. I would have liked to keep it from her, but there was no way I could stay with her mother. I picked her up at school, and while we talked, I took her to get a pizza. Trina, there's something I need to tell you. It's about your mom and me. You're getting a divorce, aren't you, Daddy? She asked. Yes, but I wanted to tell you not to get too upset. I'm sorry, honey, but your mom and I can't stay together anymore. You found out she cheated on you, didn't you, Daddy? I knew about it a long time ago and tried to keep it from you. But I knew one day you would find out. Can I live with you, Daddy? Trina said. What, you knew your mom was having an affair and you didn't tell me? I don't understand, I told her. Daddy, I love you and I don't want you to get hurt. I figured as long as you didn't find out, it wouldn't hurt you. Even though she was still a 7-year-old child, she was smart. So you didn't tell me you knew your mom was cheating on me because you didn't want me to get hurt? How long have you known about it? I asked. I've known about it since I saw her with Uncle Joe a few months ago. I was hoping it was a one-time affair with him, but later I saw her with Warren, what's his name? The guy from the grocery store? She was also too close to her friends when we went to parties. I'm sorry, Dad, but I knew you'd find out someday. I just wish it had happened later instead of sooner. Oh my God, my sweet little daughter knew her mom had affairs but didn't tell me because she didn't want to hurt me. I didn't want to ask her, but I needed to know how she even knew about her mom. Uncle Joe wasn't really an uncle. Trina only called him that because her mom told her to, out of respect. Honey, of course your mom didn't do anything, in front of you? I asked. No, Daddy, you were on a trip and I was staying with my friend Stacy on the next street over. I came home to get my bike and when I went into the garage, I heard strange noises in the house. I looked in there and saw Uncle Joe on my mom. I realized what they were doing and quietly left. Are you sure, Trina? Yes, Dad. I heard the same noises in your and Mom's house, only you kept the door closed. I saw Uncle Joe's bare ass and it was disgusting. He had a tattoo on it. Mom never knew I was there, and I was afraid to tell you. I knew it would hurt you. What about Warren? What did you see? I heard Mom talking to him on the phone. She called his name. She told him I was going to my grandmother's house later. Just before I left, I was packing my bag for the night when he came in. He grabbed my mom and kissed her. She didn't know I had seen them. She told him he had to wait until I left. When I came out of the bedroom, he just smiled at me, thanked my mom, and left. When Grandma dropped me off the next morning, he was still there and acted like he forgot to bring milk or something. Daddy, I may be young, but I'm not stupid. I didn't know whether to be angry or smile after her words. I just knew that it was over between Susan and me, and I didn't care at what cost. When we got home, Trina barely spoke to her mom. She answered all her questions but otherwise said nothing. The next morning, I drove Trina to school and then went to see John, my lawyer. He told me that Susan was right and that our property would be divided 50-50. We had a couple of surprises that Susan didn't know about. I asked John to get us a quick hearing so I could get Susan out of the house. There was no way I wanted to stay in the same house with her. On the way home, I stopped by my mom's house and asked if Trina could stay with her for a few days. I told her that Susan and I were getting divorced and I didn't want Trina to be the center of things. Mom told me to take as much as I needed. I told her I would come over to Trina's house every night. When I got home, Susan came in and laid out her demands to me. She wanted everything she could get, plus large child support payments. She even asked for child support. How stupid could she have been? I figured she hadn't told her lawyer the whole truth. I didn't say a word to her. I just went to bed. The next day, my attorney John informed me that he had scheduled a custody and residence hearing for Monday. When I got home that evening, Susan said, "How stupid can you be? You're going to make a fool of yourself by claiming I cheated on you." "Yes, I got the papers at work." "You don't have any proof, asshole. You're only going to make a fool of yourself." I didn't argue with her again, though I would have loved to kick her ass. I needed custody of Trina, and if I bullied Susan, it wouldn't look good. On Monday, we went to the judge's office. I picked Trina up from school and took her with me. Susan was with her attorney. John, my attorney, met us there. "What is Trina doing here?" Susan asked. "She's involved in the divorce. She should have the right to decide where she wants to live," I replied. "That's nonsense. The children should be with their mother," Susan objected. "Well, I guess we'll let the judge decide," was all I said. We all walked into his office. "This isn't a divorce decree, it's a hearing," the judge said. "We're here to decide who gets what and where to live. If everyone agrees, that can be stated in the divorce papers. If not, we will be governed by my ruling until there is a trial where all the evidence is presented and a decision is made." The judge asked Trina to wait in the hallway. He would speak to her in a few minutes. She stood up and quietly walked out of the hall. "She seems like a very well-mannered girl," the judge said. "It's a shame you couldn't work things out with her." Susan almost smirked. "Thank you, Judge. I try very hard," Susan replied. Damn it, she should have been an actress. I just sat there and remained silent, preferring not to argue. Susan's lawyer handed the judge the papers requesting custody of Trina. $150 a week for child support and another $100 a week for alimony. She asked for the house and property knowing she could only get half the value of the house. The judge looked over her papers and noted that in this state, divorce is no fault and everything is divided in half. This made Susan grin again, deciding that she would get what she wanted. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Royer, you have petitioned the court for this early hearing. What are your grounds for divorce?" "Judge, she is having affairs behind my back. I don't want my daughter anywhere near her." Susan shrieked, "You can't prove anything. You're pathetic. Go ahead and provide the judge with pictures or phone records. Maybe you have video. You don't have any evidence. All you have from you is hearsay." The judge told Susan to calm down and looked at me and asked if I had any such evidence. "Sir, I have an eyewitness to 2 events. My daughter Trina saw her mother's infidelity." "You're a liar," Susan shouted. "Trina was never there. How can you use our daughter like that?" Susan apparently didn't realize she had said too much, but her lawyer understood. He asked Susan to calm down. The judge stood up. "I'm going to talk to the girl alone in the hallway. I want to see what she has to say." After about 10 minutes, he returned to the hall. "She's a very nice girl. We had a good talk, and I believe her, but I have a few questions for Mrs. Royer." "He told her to talk," said Susan. "I would never do anything to hurt my daughter. He made the whole thing up." "Mrs. Royer, your daughter mentioned Uncle Joe. Are you familiar with this man?" The judge asked. "Yes, he's a family friend, but just a friend. I've never done anything with him," replied Susan. "Can you tell me if your daughter can somehow find out that he has a tattoo of a skeleton and crossbones on his back? We can subpoena him if we need to." "Oh my God, she wasn't there. She couldn't have seen it." "She would have told me," Susan replied. "She told me, Susan. She said she saw you and Joe when she went back to get her bike. She also saw you and Warren. She didn't tell you because you weren't there. And anyway, What did you expect her to say? I remarked. The judge ruled. Mr. Royer will have custody of your daughter Trina, but Mrs. Royer will have broad visitation rights. The house and all its contents will be appraised and divided equally. John, my attorney, spoke up. Sir, we have hired a firm to inventory the property and determine its current value. The house was worth $120,000, but we owed $70,000, so the net value was $50,000. The contents were valued at $30,000, so the total net worth was $80,000. This amount included our 2 automobiles. Is that all? Susan exclaimed. I bought that furniture and the car myself. They cost much more than that. I'm sorry, Mrs. Royer, but no one wins in a divorce. Mr. Royer, you get the house and property, but you'll have to pay Mrs. Royer $30,000, and you can each keep the car. Or we'll have to auction everything off and split the proceeds after we pay off our debts. I've noticed that savings are out of the question. What, he gets the house? That's not fair. I bought all that furniture with my own money, Susan said. In a marriage, it doesn't matter who bought what. There was no prenup, so everything is divided in half. He's being offered the house because he has a daughter. She's the most important one here. Her friends and surroundings are important to her. Mr. Royer, is there any way you can get $30,000 for half of Mrs. Royer's estate? The judge asked. Yes, sir. I can borrow it from my parents and pay it back to them. I'm sure the banks won't give us the money until the divorce is final. Mrs. Royer, one last thing. I noticed that you and Mr. Royer seem to have about the same income. I was surprised to hear that. So, since you have decided that $150 a week would be a fair amount of alimony, you will pay it to Mr. Royer. Neither of you will receive alimony. You will have 3 days to vacate the premises, and you may take only your personal belongings. That's not fair. Why should I have to pay him? It's not my fault he's weak. I just shook my head. The judge spoke one last time. If any of you wish to contest the divorce and the settlement agreement I have prepared, you are always welcome. Mrs. Royer, his evidence is more than enough to get custody, and the property division will probably stay in effect. I walked out into the hallway and hugged Trina. I know she loved her mother, and it's going to be hard on her. But we'll get through this. This isn't over yet. Chapter 2 will tell you what happened next. Chapter 2. Susan was very angry with the judge's decision. She thought about appealing it, but her lawyer said she had little chance of winning. I think the thing she disliked most was that she would have to pay me $150 a week for child support. I must confess that surprised me a little. My father loaned me the money to pay Susan back. I promised him I would pay him back. Every week when the court sent me money from Susan, I gave it to my father. I was making more than enough to live on, and when Susan was gone, I even had some savings. It wasn't a bad life except for Susan bugging me. Trina told me that on the weekends she spent with her mother, she was constantly being asked about me. Trina told me that her mother apologized for what she saw. Apparently, she really respected Trina or was still acting like a good mom. After a couple months, Susan started making excuses as to why she couldn't pick Trina up. She was late at work or away on business. Supposedly, she was working as a secretary for several attorneys. There was no way she could tell me more. I figured she was doing some of the work on her back. I didn't care as long as she didn't do it in front of Trina. One day, my dad called me into the office. He said he had a surprise for me. I walked in and saw an old friend. It was Samantha. We always called her Sam. When I was 12 or so, Sam moved in with us as a foster child. She was 14 at the time. Her parents were caught dealing drugs and sent to prison. Mom and Dad were asked to auction off their house and belongings. That's when they met Sam. She was going to live in foster care when my mom asked to be her foster parent. Most people take younger children into foster care, but my parents saw something special in Sam. She lived with us until she joined the service after high school. I liked her a lot, and I missed her when she went into the service. She was kind of a tomboy and didn't put up with crap from anyone. I know she loved my parents just by her actions. When they asked her to do something, she never gave them slack. I had a few guys hit on me, and I saw her kick one of them in the gonads and another one with a 2x4. She told them that if they ever hit on me again, she would kick their asses. I should say they were 2 grades above me. I doubt I would have stood a chance. I guess that's when I realized I was weak. I was pretty smart and helped Sam with her homework. She was like a big sister to me. I loved her in a way, but I never told her that. I hugged her when she left and tears came to my eyes. She came home for the vacations and I was in college. It was the first time I'd seen her in 10 years. She looked good. It's hard to describe her. Long blonde hair, a good figure as far as I could tell, and a smile with big dimples. She gave me a big hug. Dad said he'd hired her as our new secretary. I remembered that years ago he had told her that if she needed anything, to let him know. Now that she was out of the service, she was looking for a job. She said she spent the first few years of her life in combat and the last few years of her life overseas, working mostly with computers and electronics. During our divorce, it was so nice to see Sam's smiling face every morning. I want to add that Susan and Sam disliked each other from the first day they met. I remember Susan saying that Sam seemed strange to her. She even said she wondered if she was gay because she didn't date. How would she know if Sam was dating or not? She's probably being followed or something. I knew a few divorced agents had asked Sam out on dates, but she respectfully declined. She wouldn't tell anyone about her personal life. On the other hand, Sam said she enjoyed studying people and didn't consider Susan trustworthy. Mark, I care about you. I don't want to tell you how to move on with your life, but don't trust her. I didn't trust Susan. I had heard rumors that she had continued to communicate with him even during their breakup. It made me look bad, but I had to be on my best behavior so I didn't lose Trina. On Saturday, Dad invited Trina and I to Sam's homecoming party. When we arrived, I introduced Trina to Sam. They got along great for a long time. Trina never left her side the whole time we were there. I think they both made a new friend. It turned out that when Trina met Sam, there was an instant connection between them. Sam lowered his eyes when he talked to Trina. That's exactly how I knew Trina to be. Halloween was approaching, and Sam asked Trina what she was going to wear for the holiday. Trina replied that she probably couldn't go this year. She said that her mom would be late at work and wouldn't be able to take her. For those readers who don't know what a treat is, I'll try to explain. On Halloween, little kids dress up in costumes, go around the neighborhood and get candy. It used to be customary that if the treat didn't come, a prank was played on the person who didn't give it. These days, there aren't many of those pranks, and neighbors who want to participate leave their porch lights on. Sam looked up at me for an explanation. I usually hand out candy to the neighborhood kids, and Susan usually takes Trina door to door. This year, she said she had to work. I guess she doesn't feel obligated because of the divorce. Later, I told Sam the truth about Susan going to the Halloween party alone. Sam was very angry that his mother had put herself above her daughter. Sam, Susan has always put herself first, I explained. Trina, Sam said, do you want me to take you to the party with me? I'll put on my uniform and go with you. Trina couldn't be pleased. She told Sam that she was going to dress up as a princess because that's what her daddy always called her. That showed me once again what kind of person Sam was. I wondered why Susan couldn't be just as nice. Susan would come to the house and always make excuses about forgetting something. I guess she was just testing me. But it was no use because I was still the same old wuss. When Susan found out that Sam had invited Trina over for Halloween, she was furious. Trina and I deserve to live too. Go to your own damn party. Sam and I will make sure Trina goes to Trina's party. I couldn't wait until the divorce was final. After that, I'd have no reason to let Susan in the house. Right now, however, I was biding my time. When Trina wasn't around, Susan was constantly snapping at me with her lovers. She just wouldn't let me rest. I know I shouldn't have let it bother me, but it did. For Halloween, I dressed Trina up in a princess costume. She looked so cute. Sam came in her uniform, and I have to say I've never seen a better-looking soldier. I gave them both a bag each and they went for a walk to get candy. I sat on the porch and handed out candy to all the ghosts, goblins, and other kids dressed in colorful costumes. About an hour and a half later, two of my treat lovers came in with bags full of candy. Sam said Trina was very exhausted. We turned off the porch light since most of the kids were done, and Sam helped Trina with her costume. I made us some popcorn, poured us each a glass of apple cider, and we decided to watch Heroes. It was a show about a group of people with superpowers. Some could read minds, some couldn't die. One woman could freeze anything, and some could even time travel. I told Sam that I had only recently gotten interested in the series and was watching it with Trina. Of course, Trina always falls asleep and I end up watching it alone. It was so nice to have Sam by my side. It was like a family. But Sam was just a good friend and foster sister. Finally, the day came when our divorce was finalized, and life went on as usual. I really enjoyed practicing with Trina. She was my life now. I have to say that right after Trina was born, I took a DNA test. She did indeed turn out to be my daughter. I never told Susan that I took that test. I have to say there was a bad side to my life. I knew about Joe and Warren and Brad. I guess there were countless of them, but I didn't know any of the names. That was probably a good thing. In the back of my mind, I wanted revenge, but I didn't know how to go about it. Every time I saw one of these assholes, they would snicker and laugh at me. I knew it embarrassed Trina, but she didn't say anything. I knew I had to get back at her somehow, but how? I saw Sam every day on my way to work. She was one of the bright spots in my life. Ever since Sam and I finalized our divorce, we had gotten closer and closer at the office. She did everything for me. It was like she became my personal secretary. She made appointments for me and brought me tons of clients. One day when I brought Trina into the office, she and Sam were talking. When I came back from the office, Trina asked me if Sam could come with us to eat and go to a movie. Princess, Sam probably already has plans. No, I don't, Sam smiled. She probably won't like pizza and kids' movies. I love pizza and I love cartoons, Sam said, still smiling. What can I say? I think these two had guessed everything. I set a time and told Sam we were coming to pick her up. We had a great time. I enjoyed the company of the adults, especially Sam, and she and Trina got along great. On the way home, I said, we should do this again sometime. Trina looked at Sam and said, tomorrow night, Dad and I are going to make popcorn and watch Hero together. Do you want to join us? I was about to come up with another excuse, but Sam spoke first. I'd love to go watch TV with you and your dad. I was very happy about that, but I knew I had to control my emotions around Sam. We were just friends and she trusted me. I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our relationship. About halfway through the show, Trina fell asleep. Sam looked at me and asked me what I was thinking. She answered with a goofy grin on her face. I was thinking about how if I had superpowers, I could get rid of those assholes who ruined my marriage and made me a wuss. Mark, you win. Let it go. You have a beautiful daughter, a good job, and a great place to live, Sam said. I know you're right, but I can't deal with being laughed at every time I see these assholes. If I had superpowers, I could get my revenge. And what kind of power do you want? Sam asked, agreeing with me. I don't know. Maybe to have something happen to them. Like Warren freezing to death in his own refrigerator at work. Maybe a barbell will fall on Brad and crush his windpipe. You're thinking about all the bad things, Mark. That's not good. What about the good ones? She smiled at me. I had good thoughts. I wanted to kiss Sam and make love to him, but I knew that wasn't possible. Some thoughts I had to keep to myself. Sam got up to leave and thanked me for the invitation. She said she had a wonderful time and asked me to kiss Trina for her. I gave her a hug and walked her to the door. The next morning, we woke up to a thunderstorm. After picking Trina up from school, I dropped her off and headed to my office. As I was getting out of the car, a light struck next to me. I don't think it hit me, but it knocked me over and I hit my head on the car. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. Sam was standing over me. What happened? I asked. I remember seeing a light and falling. According to the doctors, you fell and hit your head on the car. You got a concussion. They did an MRI and you'll be fine, but you'll have to spend tonight in the hospital, Sam replied. What about Trina? I asked. I'll pick her up from school and bring her to you. She can spend the night with me if that's okay with you. Of course it's okay with me. There's no one I trust more. Shit, my head is splitting. Sure, you just hit your head and got a concussion. Don't worry, the doctor said you'll be as good as new in a couple days. There was something else, but I didn't want to tell Sam about it. I felt like I could do something special, some kind of superpower. I wondered if I could bend people's wills. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I made Sam kiss me. Well, I better get back to the office, take care of yourself, and obey the doctors. Then she leaned over and kissed me on the lips. It wasn't just a kiss, it felt so good. Oh, I forgot to mention that your old college friend stopped by the office this morning. He said he'd stop by here to see you. She gave me another kiss and left. I wondered if I had a superpower. She kissed me willingly. I also wondered who might have stopped by to visit me. I fell asleep and was woken up by my old friend Tony DeMarco from college. He said he had business in Ohio and decided to stop by and see me. We talked about old times and I thanked him for helping me get laid. We both laughed and he asked me about Susan. I told him about her cheating and how we got divorced. I told him I had a beautiful daughter. He mentioned that he had 3 children and was happily married. Before he left, he reminded me that if I ever needed anything, to let him know. I considered hiring him to deal with a couple of my old enemies, but there was no way I would ask a friend to do that. I started thinking about Warren again and how he was laughing at me. Just 2 days ago, he was standing in front of me telling his buddies how he had just gotten back from having sex with my ex. God, I wanted to punch him so badly. While I was contemplating revenge, I looked up and saw Trina with Sam. "Hey, princess, how's school going?" "Good, Dad. Sam told me you got caught in the light and hit your head. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Hopefully I can get out of here tomorrow," I replied. "Sam is taking me to my grandmother's, but he'll be back tonight to pick me up at my place. I'd like you to come with us." That brought a smile to my face. I would love to spend the night at Sam's. I looked at her and probably thought the same thing. I had to stop doing this. If Sam and I are meant to be together, I want it because she wants to be with me, not just because of my will. The doctor wanted to keep me another day. It was pointless to argue with him. Besides, Sam said she thought it was for the best too. When she moved closer and looked into my eyes, I couldn't help but want another kiss and I got it. "Mark, there's something I have to tell you. It's very personal, but I feel like you need to know." "What is it, Sam?" She looked a little nervous. She gestured for Trina to wait for her in the hallway. "I haven't told you the whole truth, and I need to tell you." "Tell what?" "Before I was released from the service, I was committed to a mental institution for 2 months. I wasn't crazy, but I stabbed 2 soldiers to death." "You don't have to tell me that, Sam." "No, I do. Please let me finish." "We were company at a bar and the guys had a little too much to drink. They started groping and grabbing me. I asked them several times to stop, but they wouldn't stop. 2 of them grabbed me, one holding me down and the other trying to undress me. The other guys were standing around laughing. I managed to grab a beer bottle, smash it over one guy's head, take the broken bottle, and stab the other guy in the stomach. The next thing I knew, I was arrested by the MPs and taken to a psychiatric ward where I spent 2 months. All the soldiers united and said it was all done for nothing, and I became violent. They attributed it to some kind of syndrome. I just wanted you to know the truth about my past. I'm so sorry for you. You deserve so much better. Thank you for trusting me. I wondered if I had asked her to be honest with me. I knew I'd have to keep an eye on that power. When she left, I thought about her, Tony, and Warren as I fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken up by Trina and Sam. "Dad, you can come home today. Sam and I are taking you out for breakfast. We're going to McDonald's. Not my favorite place to eat, but the company was nice." While we ate, Trina told me about everything she had done in the last 2 days. She told me that she had slept with Sam in her big bed. I laughed when she said I should sleep there sometime. I know she just wasn't thinking, but I liked the idea. When I got home, I started reading the paper. I noticed that Warren from the grocery store had been found frozen in the freezer. Apparently, the internal opening mechanism didn't work and he froze to death. The article said they didn't suspect foul play. It was just an accident. My dad called and asked if I was okay. He was out of town and didn't have time to visit me in the hospital. After I told him I was fine, he asked if I could go to the grocery store where Warren worked and fill out an insurance claim. Apparently, Warren was insured with us. Some people looked at me strangely as I filled out the paperwork. They all knew how Warren bragged about how he'd harassed my ex-girlfriend. I guess they had to guess if I had anything to do with it. They had no idea I'd bequeathed it. I mentioned the will to Sam and told her about it last week. In a weird sort of way, I killed Warren. "Mark, it was an accident. Just because you thought so doesn't make you responsible," Sam replied. "Sam, you don't understand. I'm not sad about what happened. He was an asshole and a jerk, and I'm not sad at all that he froze to death. I'm just wondering exactly how it happened. If you believe you have some super magical power, use it to your advantage. Make a wish that you have more sales and a better life," Sam said. Over the next week, I fulfilled all the appointments Sam had set for me. Before going into each house, I willed them to purchase insurance. I also sold 2 houses that week. I was happy Dad was happy, and so was Sam. Life was good until I ran into Brad. I had an appointment with a realtor to put the house on the market. When I got there, no one answered the door for several minutes. I tried ringing the doorbell again and was answered by a pleasant-looking woman in a bathrobe. "I'm Mark Royer. We've arranged to sign the deeds to your property. I have a sign that can be installed in your yard." "I'm sorry, I've lost track of time. Can I sign the papers and you install the plaque on your lawn? You can take pictures of the house from the outside, but if you can come back another time and take some pictures inside. I'd like to get it cleaned up first." "No problem. I'll send someone over tomorrow to take the rest of the pictures." I went outside and started taking pictures. Just then, I noticed a car parked on the opposite side of the street. It was Brad's car. I knew him well from the way he sat in my driveway. He must have been sleeping with Mrs. Diaz. Sam said the woman was getting a divorce and wanted to sell her house. I wondered if Brad was the cause of her divorce. Seems old Brad wasn't just cheating on Jill, he was cheating on Susan too. There was nothing I could do about it. I called Susan to make sure she was picking up Trina for the weekend, but mostly I wanted to tell her that I had seen Brad. I know I only saw his car, but that was enough for me. 2 days later, Brad was found dead on one of the exercise machines. Apparently he was working out and the weight was too heavy. The barbell slipped and squeezed his throat. The police questioned him. I know they came to my house, but I had the perfect alibi. I was with Trina at school. She was at the game, but unfortunately her mom couldn't make it. I wondered if it was my wish that made all of this happen. I was sure it was, but I hoped it wasn't Jill's fault. She deserved so much more than she got. I remember talking to Sam about it, and I reminded her how I told her that was how I wanted him to die. I know I didn't force Jill to do it, but it was all new to me. I really need to learn to control my thoughts better. The police have left the case open for now, but haven't ruled out murder, although it could have been an accident. My sales had improved dramatically, and our life with Trina couldn't have been better. Sam came into our lives more and more often. Every time I was going to take Trina somewhere, she always asked if Sam could come with us too. I was completely confused about my thoughts and emotions. Did I really cause Trina to have all these emotions towards Sam? Did Sam really want to come with us because I decided to? Believe it or not, I really didn't like it. I wanted the three of us to be together simply because we wanted to be. I didn't want it to be because I wanted it to be. I was supposed to be working in a new apartment complex. There were several construction companies there, and I was in charge of the builder's liability insurance. I had to go through all the construction companies and get the necessary insurance forms. Before I knew it, I came across the company that Joe Akers worked for. It was the same infamous Uncle Joe that Trina had seen with my ex. He laughed as I walked by. If only people knew how this guy felt. I walked up to him when he was alone and said, "I'm going to make you die. I did it to Warren, Brad, and now you. Laugh about it, you son of a bitch." As I walked away, he looked completely dumbfounded. I know he must have read about the death in the paper, and he must have known about my divorce. At least I gave him something to think about. My friend Tony called me and said he would be passing through town and asked if we could have lunch. We met, talked about old times, and he invited me to New York for a vacation. He asked if I was seeing anyone, and I said I had a woman I liked, but we weren't serious. I told him about Sam, and he said it sounded pretty serious to him. He asked how I was doing after my divorce. He knew I had become a cuckold, and I was having a hard time living with it. I told him that 2 guys had been found dead. "Hell, maybe a third will show up too," he grinned as he said those words. "Anyway, ask that woman Sam if she wants to go to New York with you. Take your daughter and my wife with you, and I'll show you the city." In the evening, I called Sam and told her what Joe had said. I mentioned that I was very tired of being laughed at and told her that I willed him to die. I then told her that maybe I should add Susan to that list. "Mark, you have to stop this. I'm worried about you. As for Susan, she's your daughter's mother. You can't hurt her. So what did you tell this Joe guy?" "That it's his turn now. I don't know how he's going to die. I haven't made a will yet." "Stop it, Mark. You can't go on like this. Please, if for no other reason, stop it for me." I wasn't sure what she meant. I was never sure if her thoughts were really hers or mine. I changed the subject and asked if she wanted to go on vacation to New York. My friend Tony had invited us and was going to show us around the city. She immediately agreed. Of course, I had to wonder if it was my intention or her own decision. I really didn't like that power. It was good that I was rid of those assholes, but what about my relationship with Sam? Was it real or not? I had an evening appointment, so I drove Trina to her parents' house. After signing the papers, I headed back into town when I was hit by another car. The next thing I knew, I was back in the hospital. Sitting next to my dad was Sam again. What happened? I think I got hit sideways. How long was I out? My father was the first to speak. You were in a coma for 3 days. Sam, your mom and I took turns sitting with you. What about Trina? Is she okay? She's fine, but she's worried about her dad, Sam said. Just like the rest of us. She's been staying with your mom. We didn't want to bring her here and see you unconscious. We're bringing her here this afternoon, Dad said. Is there something you're not telling me? It feels like you want to tell me something, but you're waiting. Dad spoke up. I thought it could wait, but since you asked, I can tell you. Joe Akers was killed the same night you were in the accident. The police were looking for you, but knew it couldn't have been you since you were in a coma, in the hospital. Murdered? How? Where? I asked. I saw him a couple days ago at a construction site. That's why the police were looking for you. I think he told one of his friends that he had sex with Susan. That woman sure fooled me, Dad said. Sam looked around the scene. Apparently his truck caught fire in front of Susan's apartment. According to the report, he was visiting Susan, and as he was leaving, he got into his truck and it burst into flames. He was drunk, and he didn't stand a chance. He was burned alive. I looked at Sam. She knew what I was thinking. I willed his death, but how? I don't know. I couldn't remember. All I could think about was being hit by a car. Sam and Dad left, but said they would be back later to visit me and bring Trina. I thought about Sam, but no kiss followed. I wondered if I had lost my superpower. I felt good, and I felt hungry. I wanted steak, but I got meatloaf. I decided to give it a try. My mom brought Trina over to me. I was so happy to see both of them. I asked about Sam, and Mom said she was busy finishing up my work. She can do everything except sign legal documents. You really care about Sam, don't you, Mark? I see it every time she's around. I'm sorry, Mom. We don't have anything to be sorry about. She's a wonderful person and we love her. She was a foster child, not your sister. It's okay to fall in love with her, Mom said, smiling at me. But Mom, I don't know how she feels. We've never talked about it. She's so good with Trina. I love Sam, Trina said. She's beautiful and she treats me well. She even treats me better than Mom does. I think she loves you too, Daddy. What makes you think it's a princess? I asked Trina. Just from the way she acts around you, and she always walks with us when you ask, Trina replied. I wondered if it was because of my will. I guess abilities aren't quite what they seem. The doctor said I could go home after lunch. Mom called the office and told Dad that she and Trina would stay with me and take me home. In the evening, Sam came over to watch Heroes with me and Trina. She made us some popcorn and we sat down on the couch and watched the show. As usual, Trina fell asleep, so Sam took her to her room and put her to bed. When she came back into the room, I blinked my eyes over and over again. What are you doing, Mark? Are your eyes okay? Do you want me to call a doctor? After all, you have another concussion. No, I wanted to see if I'd lost my powers. I figured I lost them when I tried to use them at the hospital. What were you trying to do? The 3 men you wanted revenge on are dead. At the hospital, I tried to get them to bring me a steak. Sam laughed. So what were you trying to do when I entered the room? I can't tell you, I'm embarrassed. Come on, you know you can trust me, Sam replied. I wanted to see if I could get you to kiss me. I stared at her. She looked me in the eyes again. I had no idea what she was thinking. If that's what you wanted, all you had to do was ask. She leaned forward and kissed me. Mark, I've been waiting for you. I wasn't sure how you felt, and I didn't want to ruin our relationship. I've cared about you since I've been back in town. That's why I told you about my past. I even kissed you at the hospital, but you never kissed me back. That's because I thought you were only kissing me because I wanted you to. I wanted you to kiss me because I want you to. Then why don't you want us to make love together? For the same reason. I wanted you to want me for who I am, not because you were made to want me. So you have no power now, do you? Sam asked. Exactly, I replied. All the power is gone. Then take me to your bedroom and make love to me. I really want to. I took her hand and led her to my bedroom. You're so beautiful, I remarked. This is reality, isn't it? I'm not hallucinating or dreaming, am I? No, we're real, she said. We climbed on the bed and started having fun. The last thing I remember before I fell asleep were Sam's words, I love you. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I did was head for the shower. When I got out, Sam smiled at me and went into the shower as well. We were both sitting at the table drinking coffee when Trina walked into the kitchen. Good morning, Daddy. Good morning, Sam. Did you sleep here last night? She asked. She asked. I knew it was a little awkward, but Sam just told her. Yeah, I was too tired to go home. It was funny, but Trina didn't ask any more questions. She just picked up her bowl, pulled out her cereal, and started eating her breakfast. On the way to work, I shared my feelings with Sam, telling her that I loved her. I was also glad that I had lost the power that I had. I just didn't know how to control it. And more importantly, I wanted to know that when she said she loved me, I knew it wasn't by my will, but by her heart. Before I got out of the car, Sam leaned over and kissed me and said, I really love you, Mark, and I will do anything to make you happy and for us to be together. The day was going pretty well until I heard a voice that I hated. It was Susan in the waiting room. Where's Mark? I want to talk to him, Susan said. She walked past Sam and into my office. The door was open and she closed it behind her. I know you are behind the deaths of my past lovers. I'm going to prove it and arrest you. You won't get away with this. Susan had never known of my power, which was now gone. I now wished I had willed her death, but it was too late. I had nothing to do with the deaths of your asshole lovers. Moreover, after each death, I went to the police. During 2 of them, I was in the hospital myself. I was even in a coma during one of them. You'd have to be a real magician to put all the blame on me. I know you're to blame, but I don't know how, Susan replied. Get out of my office before I call security. God knows marrying you was a mistake. The only good thing that came from you was Trina. If I wanted to kill anyone, it would have been you. As she left my office, she slammed the door shut, but I heard her walk out into the hallway. I opened the door slightly and listened. There was no one in the hallway or neighboring offices at this time. We were getting ready to close for the night. It was Susan and Sam arguing. The sound was not very pleasant. Sam seemed to be in control of the situation. Listen, bitch. You stay away from Mark. You've caused him enough trouble. If you want trouble, you'll get it. I have something to show you, Sam remarked. Sam handed Susan a manila envelope. When she opened it, it contained pictures of Susan with various men. Where did you get these? Susan asked fearfully. Frightened. Susan asked. Frightened, Susan asked. Let's just say they were planted on my desk. As you can see, these are all pictures of you having fun with your lovers. Notice the date and time on each one. It looks like you were the last person to see Warren, Brad, and Joe before each of them passed away prematurely, Sam said. Who took these pictures? Did you take them? Did you do them? You know who killed my boys, don't you? I'm going to go to the police and show them those pictures, Susan shouted. I suggest you think carefully before you show anyone those pictures. Have you ever heard of the Black Widow spider? She has sex with her mates before she kills them. You may have killed your lovers. You were the last person to see them alive. I will tell the police that you gave me those pictures, Susan replied. I'll be wearing gloves and I'll deny that I saw them. As I said, those pictures happened to be on my desk one morning. Besides, I've never met any of these men. I think you should stay away from Mark and stop accusing him, and now me, of murder. He doesn't know about the other men or your latest toy, Larry. How do you know about Larry and the others? Susan asked. It's not how I know, it's what I know. I have a proposition for you, said Sam. Why do I have to listen to everything you say? Susan remarked. Because if you don't, both you and your last sex could end up among the rest of us. You and your friend can just get out of town, away from Mark. Your lives could depend on it. I know your law firm has other branches. I suggest you and Larry transfer to one of them as soon as possible. What about my daughter? What about Trina? You'll be able to see her whenever you want. Mark is a great guy that you've neglected. I'm here to protect him. Just let him know when you can see Trina, and we'll bring her to you. You'll probably miss her a lot over the holidays. You're in love with Mark, aren't you? You just wish I wasn't in the world. If I wanted you gone, you'd be dead by now. I might even be saving your life right now. I won't tell you anything else. If you move, The life you save could be your own. I heard Susan step out into the hallway. What were you and Susan arguing about? I asked Sam. Just girl talk. I told her to leave you alone or I'd kick her ass. I even suggested she move to the next town over, she replied. I didn't want to get into that. If things worked out the way Sam suggested, I would be happy. The next week I got a call from Susan. She said she had a chance to get another promotion, but she'd have to leave next week. It will definitely be on the other side of the state. She asked about meeting with Trina. I made an appointment with her before I left. I also told her that we could arrange to meet when she had a free weekend and, of course, the holidays. She seemed happy with these arrangements. When I went out into the lobby and told Sam about it, she smiled. Mark, I knew it was Susan, and I was listening to your call. I hope you're not mad at me. I heard you talking about the extension. No, I'm not angry, and I want to thank you for being honest with me. You and Trina are my life. You should know that. Epilogue. A month later, Sam and I were married. Trina was almost as happy as I was. Mom and Dad said they couldn't be happier and were glad we found each other. We spent our honeymoon in New York City. Tony and his wife let us stay at their mansion and showed us around the city. Trina traveled around New York with us and stayed overnight with Tony's kids while we enjoyed the nightlife. The last thing Tony said to me before we headed home was, "Don't forget, if you ever need me, I'm only a phone call away." Trina visits her mother a couple times a year. We've never had any other problems with Susan, and we still get her check every month. As for the deaths of Susan's lovers, they are still unsolved. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.